Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, welcome back to another walk and talk. Again, a bit of different scenery and trying to do a bit of explore on these walks, which is good. And some of these places that are on the doorstep you just never really kind of get a chance to go over and see. But it's not a bad day, much better than yesterday, less muddy, and so always great. But you know, we're not here to talk about scenery, we're not here to talk about going out and getting a little bit of fresh air and some kind of exercise in with a walk, but we are here to discuss everything to do with Bitcoin's most recent price movements. So we have seen Bitcoin moving up quite nicely. And there's some interesting kind of structures and things like that are appearing. We haven't quite broken out of every bearish situation, but we are breaking out of most of them, which is great to see for Bitcoin. And what I'll talk about today is some of the stuff that's happening kind of behind the scenes. I kind of posted something on Twitter earlier today and kind of talking about the amount of liquidations that we see for Bitcoin specifically, which is well over $200 million of liquidations for BTC. Now this is pretty sizable in terms of the amount of liquidations that we see generally across all of crypto, and Bitcoin's quite a sizable chunk of those liquidations, which means that there's a lot of money being transferred between people. Now, in terms of liquidations, we can see and we can acknowledge that Bitcoin, with $200 million of liquidations, 80% of that sits in short positions, which helps fuel the price movements to the upside. So something that we call a short squeeze, right? A short squeeze essentially is where people who were betting that the price was going to go down, they are essentially having to be forced to buy a stock, or in this case Bitcoin, to basically pay back their debts, right, essentially. It's kind of oversimplification, but what that means is that it fuels the push to the upside. So you end up with this huge rise in price as more and more short positions get liquidated, more and more buying pressure mounts up, pushing the price even higher, liquidating more shorts, and it basically just continues and continues and continues until the liquidity runs out. Okay, and we call it a short squeeze because essentially what typically tends to happen is price goes crashing back down. Which brings me on to a few of the other things that we've seen in terms of data recently when it comes to Bitcoin. And we have seen that retail investors are actually starting to sell off some of their assets. Now this might be because, time of year, we're approaching more seasonal times, Christmas for example. Maybe they need some liquidity to kind of fund things over the festivities, right? So we have that to kind of contend with a little bit. We also have the idea that, times are getting tougher, right? It's hard to think that Bitcoin's price is always going to be buoyant, and sometimes people just like to take profits off the table considering everything that's going on in the real world, right? There's a lot of things that haven't really changed at a macro level in terms of the economy. So there are a few concerns out there. It doesn't surprise me if retail investors are running out of funds, with mortgage rates going up, cost of living going up, energy bills going up, so much going up, right? And so with inflation still being a bit of a problem, it doesn't surprise me that some profits are being taken off the table. But as we spoke about before, when there's a seller, that's right, there's a buyer. And we are starting to see pockets of buying occurring at the slightly larger level, the more institutional level whale investor. Okay, there's nothing major going on here. We are talking very, very small numbers, but the numbers are starting to show retail sell, whales buy. Now, it is happening a little bit higher in price, which again isn't necessarily a good thing. I know a lot of people kind of say, well, why would whales be buying at higher prices when they were selling at cheaper prices? Essentially, there's a strategy to be had here from whale investors, which basically allows them to hold such a significant amount of BTC that they can dictate the direction that it goes in terms of price. So we want to be a little bit aware that this is only really the beginning of something, potentially. With all that being said, though, we cannot ignore that a lot of bullish structures have appeared. We even broke through some of those major areas on the daily time frame. Now this to me tells me that a bull run is coming. It is just around the corner and we need to be preparing ourselves. It's a whole part of dollar cost averaging on the next correction to the downside. I said this a few videos ago. I think a lot of people just look at the title and the thumbnail and kind of get the wrong end of the stick there. But essentially what I'm saying here is I'm expecting a pull to the downside because it's only healthy that we do see natural corrections. And with this most recent move to the upside where we took out the $35,000 CME gap, there's only two CME gaps left remaining, one at 20 to 21,000 and one down there at 9,900 or something to that effect. So we have to be aware that there's a high probability that we are revisiting $20,000 Bitcoin. Not to say that we have to go down any lower than that, but I think $20,000 is something that we need to kind of acknowledge as something that is likely to happen. And so with BTC kind of fueling or kind of running out of fuel to the upside, hitting that CME gap, then the next moves are to the downside. And I say $20,000 is the obvious area to be kind of thinking about. Which means on that next pullback is going to be potentially one of the last opportunities to dollar cost average into Bitcoin before the next bullish market, which I do think is just around the corner, as I was saying. So we want to be aware that I think there's one last opportunity to really do some good dollar cost averaging in the market. Many altcoins will still have new lower lows in my opinion. They haven't really moved most recently. And I do expect us to kind of see many altcoins hitting new bear market lows in the coming months. And that's the opportunity, right? Because we talk about Bitcoin a lot on the channel. Bitcoin's great, right? It's the original, right? It's up there, it's #1 by market cap. It's fantastic, but let's not kid ourselves into thinking it's what's going to drive your portfolio into those, six-figure numbers that maybe you're dreaming of. Instead, we have to understand that, Bitcoin's great, it's going to lead the market, but it's the altcoins that are going to give you the most percentage gains on your portfolio. And so when you can get those and dollar cost average those altcoins that you've been keeping an eye on, at these lower levels that I think are to come, that is the opportunity. Okay, so I kind of wanted to put a video out there kind of talking about how Bitcoin has had this great move to the upside. It is bullish regardless of whether we are bearish or not short term. Essentially we've broken through some of those really bearish patterns that were playing out, and that's fantastic news. Okay, so that means that I do think a healthy correction to the downside is coming. Kind of spoke about this in the TA video that I put out this morning, and that is the opportunity to be dollar cost averaging and building your portfolios, in my humble opinion. But do remember, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just a guy on YouTube, right, sharing his thoughts and opinions on what he thinks is happening in the space. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. I'm going to leave this video right there. If you have found it useful and informative, smash that like button. I do appreciate that. If you are new to the channel, subscribe, and don't forget to join us down in Discord. Until the next one though, guys, have a fantastic day.